Hello and welcome to Sunday Politics on Trust TV, your go-to destination for everything politics, policy and governance. I'm Shafiu Suleiman. Tonight, we focus our searchlight on the President Bwala Tinubu administration's policy choices, with particular interest in their intentions, implementation, deliverables and identified gaps. Recall that the President has, upon inauguration in May last year, made the infamous statement that subsidy is gone, confirming his resolve to end the petrol subsidy regime in the country, considered as an unjustifiable burden to successive administrations. Shortly thereafter, the Tinubu administration also announced the harmonization of the nation's currency exchange rate, taking away an existing support to the naira to allow it find its real value by competing with other currencies, and by extension free the intervention for other critical needs such as infrastructure, healthcare, education and job creation. These and other controversial policies such as the embattled tax reform have sent shockwaves across the nation's economic landscape, leaving in their wake cost of living crisis, hunger, declining purchasing power, rising inflation and unemployment, among other unintended consequences. Joining me to review and dissect and evaluate the pros and cons of these policy options amidst growing concerns is the Special Advisor to President Bwala Tinubu on Policy Communication, Barrister Bwala. He joins me live from the nation's capital, Abuja. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining, Barrister.
Thank you for having me. Good evening to your viewers.
Yes,
my voice, I must say, is hoarse, but I hope we can make the most of it.
I'm very sorry about that. Congratulations once again on your appointment.
Thank you.
Thank you. To see you. Right. Okay, so we go straight into the conversation. But let me start with this. You know, I'm sure many Nigerians would want to hear from you after that press engagement. You know, when you presented yourself with, you presented yourself to the media with a nomenclature. You know, and then a couple of hours later, it was reviewed by the presidency. You felt, humble, so to speak, very humble by that decision to cut to size, so to speak, your initial appointment nomenclature?
First of all, we are all servants and aid to the president, and we exist and operate at his own pleasure. So wherever the president wishes to deploy us, we can only say thank you and operate. But when you say there is a controversy or whatever, I don't think there's a controversy, because when the announcement was made of the appointment of my good self as Special Advisor on Media and Public Communication, it was announced by the presidency and everybody knows that. And based on the marching order of the president, I addressed the press and then I relate exactly what my task and assignment, was. But you understandably, the president was out of the country, and so a press statement was issued, which is said to have been mandated from Mr. President. So the president thankfully has arrived. We accept whatever decision he makes, and if there is an error in that announcement, I'm sure Mr. President, who is the Commander-in-Chief, our boss, will correct what needs to be corrected. But as for me, I am very happy in whatever capacity that the president finds me worthy to operate. I will count it an honor and a privilege, and I will deploy my all and the very best to ensure that we not only fulfill the mandate of the president, but we make the president proud.
Right, you're quoted to have said somewhere that there was an overwhelming kind of conspiracy against you. You even, opted out for prayer. Some will find it extremely difficult to understand, who is behind this conspiracy or what exactly is happening within the communication team of the president.
No, the communication team of the president, they are very united, and we are working according to plan. The conspiracy I'm referencing has to do with the media, not the presidency. But if you have noticed in the last few days, and we actually, before I made that statement, because I was able to gather cogent and compelling reason of the conspiracy by some television anchors alongside television guests who are brought purposely for the purposes of maligning my name and character, and then using online bloggers to do the same. In some cases, they peddle lie, but in other cases, they want to sustain the blackmail. They are hoping that with the blackmail, they will get the president to reverse his decision to appoint me. As for the president, if the president is the audience, that they are planning that their conspiracy, it is failed and dead on arrival, because the president has always been known as somebody who, when he makes up his mind on anything and is convinced about nothing, changes his mind. He is a politician that has massive experience, and he knows, in fact, the intrigues of political power play. So he's never going to be taken by surprise. But the one that baffles me is the conspiracy of the media. In taking, for example, I give you an example. There's this drunkard that moved from one TV house or the other,
that isn't
maligning my name,
too harsh,
saying all kinds of defamatory statements, hoping that I will join issues with him so we can create a talking point and distract us from what the president has asked us to do. But I choose not to go into that. But the reason why I actually made the point was because it became palpable. But it is not something that you say and begin to worry yourself about it, because one thing about life is, if what you're doing is right, you don't bother about it. Whatever conspiracy people gather, they will gather, but they will scatter.
Well, okay, I wouldn't want to dwell much on this, because we have a number of issues to talk about, policy options. And the fact that you are there specifically to communicate policies of the administration. Let's start with the most recent one, that has generated a lot of controversy. The tax reform bill, before the National Assembly has generated a lot of ripples, within the polity. For instance, in spite of the overwhelming rejection of that bill by the North, so to speak, we've seen governors rising in unison, to say that no to it. We've seen traditional institutions also coming to say no to it. And then just recently, the Northern Elders Forum has also joined in that. And of course, a number of lawmakers at individual levels have also frowned at the bill and perhaps what it is intending to achieve and so on. But in spite of this, there are feelers that the presidency, if you like, the federal government is pushing, very strongly, lobbying the National Assembly members to get these bills passed. Why is the presidency or the president obsessed with this bill in spite of the rejection?
It is not an obsession. It is actually the mandate of the president. Remember when he went on campaign, he campaigned on those, promises. And it is encapsulated in his manifesto, actually. So he is trying to make good his promise to the Nigerian people. And so there is no obsession there. It is passion to deliver on good governance. And the reason why you hear the outcry and the belief that the tax bill is against the North is because some stakeholders in the North lend their voice in that regard. In other words, people peddle the politicization of the bill, because quite frankly, a lot of them who criticize that they have not looked at the bill. I mean, some of the proponents of the bill are Northerners. For example, Honorable Abdul Mumin, many years ago in the National Assembly, he proposed that. If you carefully look at that bill, actually it is the harmonization of all the tax laws in the country to deliver efficient tax administration in Nigeria. And I know that we are going to have time to deal more on that, but let me just tell you a few things about that. It is classified into 4 different enactments. You have the Nigerian tax bill, which is, of course, the mother or the ground norm of all the tax administration. So it has apart from the tax bill, you have the Nigerian tax administration bill, you have the revenue service establishment bill, you have the joint revenue board establishment bill. So let me tell you, for example, in the tax bill, some of the benefits that the Nigerian people will get. Now, for example, one is the exemption of individuals earning below 800,000 from paying tax. Isn't it wonderful? Because before now, even if you are earning 800 or you are earning below 800, still you will have to pay certain tax. But in this tax administration, if your earning per annum is less than 800, then you are not required to pay tax. And that has nothing to do with the North or the South. And those earning 50 million naira, for example, will pay 25% of their income rate. But under the current law, you remember that if you're earning, even if it is 3.2 million, you will still be required to pay tax. There is the exemption of business from paying income tax if the business's annual income is less than 50 million. You also have the reduction of company income tax rate from 30 to 25. And there are quite a number of benefits that this tax harmonization of the tax bill will deliver to, first, private citizens, secondly, income earners, people who work, working class, and the third one, those who do small-scale business like the SMEs, because we need to encourage small and medium-scale businesses. And the fourth one, of course, companies that are either small or big in their own right. And then, of course, the coordination of tax so that we do not have all these tax embellished in different laws that at the end of the day, the implementation or administration of the tax becomes incumbent, on the Nigerian people.
That is on the side of the public. Even at that, some wondering why tax. This administration is known with this. Before now, President Bwala Tinubu, while he was governor in Lagos, many raised concerns around that taxation, excessive taxation. And then looking at the situation in the country, some are beginning to find it difficult to reconcile between taxing people and then at the same time, lacking in abilities to provide an enabling environment for people to pay tax. How do you tax people that are, who are facing severe difficulties, even struggling to live? How do you expect them as a government to pay taxes, in this situation?
So what happened is tax administration system is global. Even in some of the most advanced countries like the United Kingdom or United States, the reason we all travel there and we enjoy our holidays is because they have better infrastructure. They also have better system of administration. And the reason why those things are functional is because they're able to generate money, tax from the people to be able to match that. I mean, the United Kingdom is not like the US or some of the oil producing states. Everything there is taxed. Everything is taxed. And that's why there is this fight between the Conservative and the Labour Party over whether or not to tax. When the Conservative were there, they were taxing here and there. They introduced a lot of tax even to students who want to go to study. Because they are even private sector driven political party. But when the Labour Party that just took over recently came on board, they have even increased the tax rate. You see, the idea of tax is to be able to generate revenue. If you look at our country today, you will realize that apart from oil, which is our mainstay, we do not have many other means by which revenue is generated in the country. We are not a manufacturing country. Few businesses are operational. Some of the businesses who are operating now are unable to operate, just like you said, without the right enabling environment. Those environments you and I are talking about are infrastructure. You should be able to have uninterrupted power to run your business so you can deliver to the customers. We talk about infrastructure in terms of the road, so that whatever you produce, you're able to deliver it across the country within a short time. Have we gone to talk about security, where you have a very secure system? We haven't talked about technology and the establishment of a secured cyberspace. So ours is a country where we're lagging behind in a lot of things. We have limited income generation mechanism, and hence the need for us to harmonize our tax system so that we can find other ways of generating revenue other than oil, and then to be able to meet up with some of the needs. Again, if you look at these, the four elements of the tax laws, you can see that some of these other ones also deal with the poverty and the hunger of the people. As is presently constituted as a Nigerian citizen, even in this hunger, there is a certain amount, like I told you, if you are earning 800,000 annually, you are paying tax. If you are earning below 50 million as a business in 1 year, you are still paying heavy tax. But with this tax system, there are people who will not even need to pay, like we talked about, if you are earning 800 per annum, you don't need to pay tax. So when we hear about tax laws, it seems as if everything about the law is about taxing people. No. So many provisions in the law is about freeing people from the burden of tax.
Yeah, I'm sure you're also aware of the trust deficit between the people I mean, and those at the helm of affairs in terms of, accountability and the level of corruption in the system and so on. We'll talk about that, but then taking you a little bit back to what you've said earlier. You did say that there is no obsession, to this bill, but it appears, the concerns being raised by stakeholders are genuine. For instance, the Northern Elders Forum did talk about, question the rationale behind leaving, a crucial segment of the National Economic Council in the dark in terms of, the conception, if you like, and even the introduction of the bill. They see that as a deliberate attempt, to skew, or rather to deprive them from having, a prior knowledge of understanding of this bill. That's one aspect of it. Again, the presidency was also quick to say, I think through some of the drivers of this bills, that the bill has come to stay, that there's no going back about it. And now we're hearing about this push, through lobby of the National Assembly members to get it passed. And you are also aware of the main concern that the North is going to be shortchanged. It's going to be skewed. It's going to be shortchanged because part of the bill, indicates that taxes will now be paid, to location of companies that are producing this, goods and services and so on. Forget about those who are consuming, and is the largest percentage of those that should benefit from the taxes. How would you reconcile all of these issues?
So let me start with this last one, and then I will run back to the idea of giving the impression as if the president wants to impose himself. The president is not in any way trying to impose himself. What is playing out, I think, is politics. One thing about lawmaking process, as you may know, is that everything is about lobbying. If you have an agenda to push through the lawmakers, remember that the lawmakers are representatives of the Nigerian people. There is no part of Nigeria that is not represented in the National Assembly. And so the National Assembly reflects on the worries and concerns of their people. So when these tax administration or tax reform bills were proposed, again, maybe because of lack of enough education regarding the content and provisions of those relevant bills, a lot of people kind of express apathy. But that's why last week, I think it was Monday, if I'm not mistaken, or Tuesday, where there was a stakeholder meeting between those from the part of tax administration in Nigeria, the National Assembly, and the public, to be able to engage with them and then talk more about the benefits of the tax, where you can also raise concern if you feel that it's not good for you. But again, with respect to the payment of tax where businesses are located, I think that is the concept globally. And if before now, tax are distributed disproportionately, let me give you an example, my brother. If you look at our energy, oil and gas, for example, we already have an existing law where there is a derivation formula, where places where oil are produced, they get certain percentage that is above places where oil are not, the oil is not produced. And so if that is applied to, for example, a tax system, the highest taxpayer in Lagos State is a northerner. Dangote's companies in the Lagos is the highest single tax company, that is single company, not a lot of entity that pays tax, but he's a northerner. I think that what that also would mean is that states are going to wake up and make their states enviable by providing the enabling environment for people to thrive. Let me tell you, if the governors in Nigeria dig deep and look within, we have the land and infrastructure that will take a lead in terms of productivity in this country. We have the landmass, we have the arable land, we have the population, we have quite a number. And sometimes when a time of reckoning comes like that, it is a time for our people to be able to rise above the level. There was a time this northern Nigeria was the main producer of the revenue of the country through, I think through the pyramid, the groundwood and some of it, not the main, but all participated largely. It was so that productivity kind of reduced over a period of time.
Yeah, but
and so our federating units, the governors, ought to look deep and then develop, because some of these companies, Bwala is a northerner. His business interest is not in the north. Dangote is a northerner. The business interest is not in the north. Virtually all the major business people in the country are all concentrating their businesses in one place. So there is no agenda there, because Lagos appears over the years, for example, of Port Harcourt.
Why should it be so? Why should it be so? Because some say it's a matter of policy also. Because taking a look at perhaps some of the regulations by the central bank, directing banks, to relocate their headquarters to Lagos and so on, the telecom sector, if you look at the consumption, if you look at the numbers in terms of subscriber base, you will realize that the numbers are here. But then tax is paid, to Lagos. Why should it be skewed in favor of Lagos and perhaps the southwest?
No, Lagos, before Nigeria was created, Lagos was an existence for everybody. It was a place discovered before Nigeria was discovered, where we have the sea, and business was established long ago. Northerners were major businessmen in Lagos. Southeasterners are businessmen. South is businessmen. As a matter of fact, the richest man in Africa is a northerner. Where is his business? It's in Lagos. Let's take away this sentiment, and I think that we are whooping up sentiment that will not help the polity. Let me give you an example. Donald Trump just won the election that has not been inaugurated. He nominated two people, Ramaswamy and Elon Musk. They are heading a quasi non-government administrative body called, I think, government something, like a reform of government administrative system. Part of the mandate given to them was to make government efficient. Do you know what they are proposing? Today I listened to Ramaswamy. All the places in the United States of Nigeria where a particular line of trade or business or anything is concentrated, they will move the headquarters back to those places. I don't know if you heard about that, where they say they want to drain the swamp, empty the DC, because, for example, they say there is no need for you to put in Washington, DC, headquarters of an oil company when the oil company is in Houston or in Dallas, Texas. So you see, it's a global phenomenon. It's in a bid to diversify. It's in a bid to strengthen the economy. It's a bid to challenge people to rise up to productivity. But again, like I said earlier, and it bears repeating, it's a matter of deliberation. It's a matter of politicking. If it doesn't sail, the Nigerian people would have said no to it. If the Nigerian people reason with it, it will sail. That's the whole idea of democracy. It's still an ongoing debate.
But why the haste, some will say, if exactly is intended, to benefit the people, and if there is no sinister motive, why should there be haste, to get it passed when other stakeholders are yet to understand what is obtained, in that bill and some of the loopholes perhaps addressed. It means that there is this push to just pass it without necessarily getting the buy-in of the people who are the direct beneficiaries, if that is what the government is saying. But then we have other issues to talk about. Let's talk about the subsidy removal, petrol subsidy removal, and why it was done, and what is on ground. Mr. President, during that speech, he did mention that the subsidy has to go, perhaps to pave way for what he said, government to free money to be able to invest in infrastructure, to be able to invest in education, to be able to invest in healthcare, and of course create jobs. Now, 2 years almost down the lane, Nigerians are finding it difficult to understand if there is any benefit that is derivable from that action, taking away the subsidy. Take, for instance, let's start with the first, infrastructure. How much of investment has been made in the infrastructure drive, to warrant or to get Nigerians to agree that, the removal is in their own interest?
Okay, so this is not a rocket science, right? I will put it this way. The removal of fuel subsidy and the unification of the forex market or forex exchange is what we did not because we wanted to do it. It's what we did because we have no option but to do it. Because before now, the government was paying, I think, up to the tune of $2 billion every month to subsidize for fuel. So if you're going to sustain that, you need about $24 billion per annum to be able to do that. That's one, and the money is not there. Secondly, the people that will give you the loan said they are not going to give you loan to be subsidizing what cannot be traceable. Why? Because the National Assembly, the 9th National Assembly or 10, that's the National Assembly that ended before the 2023. Yeah. Okay, the 9th National Assembly, they did their investigation and came with a finding that out of the purported liters of fuel or petrol that was claimed to have been, that was consumed in Nigeria, they said about less than 45% were actually consumed in Nigeria, the rest were taken out of the country. So that means the subsidizing of the petrol was not primarily benefiting the Nigerian people, yet the federal government is spending stupendous money in order to subsidize for that. That's one case scenario. There is no money on ground. Nobody is willing to give you loan to do that unless you can guarantee that the loan you're taking, you're going to put in infrastructure. And then the Nigerian people are not the primary beneficiaries. That is one. So this, I'm talking about subsidy and the forest put together if you're going to defend that. So the president now said, when he took the oath of office and there was no money, he now said, look, we are going to embark on this reform because we have no option. So Nigerians, like you rightly asked, they said, what is the benefit? I'll tell you the benefit quickly. Number one, when the president took over the oath of office, I remember the conversation at the time was that over 20 states of the federation were bankrupt and insolvent, and that they couldn't pay even salary, they couldn't pay nothing. When the bankruptcy. Even the loans they were collecting left, right, and center, they couldn't do that. After the removal of subsidy and unification of the foreign exchange, we have increased revenue, which has increased the earning of the states to the point now no state in Nigeria is said to be bankrupt. Rather, we are begging the governors to deliver on the promise to the Nigerian people in the areas of infrastructure, agriculture, and the rest. That's one benefit. Second benefit, after the increase of when we began having the increased revenue, we began to see areas and needs where we were going to invest, like in agriculture, for example. Because agriculture, like you may probably observe, even in the last G20 meeting was part of the concern. That was what actually characterized the reform agenda, the global reform agenda to deal with poverty and climate change. So we needed money to be able to do that. And we're able to deal with some of the problems to increase our oil production. When he came on board, it was 1.1, 1.2. We have about 1.6 to 1.7. Some even argue that it may be up to 1.8. And if we want to have a viral economy where we do not have to borrow money, then we have to necessarily produce on the minimum 3.2 million barrels per day. And for you to be able to do that, you have to invest in infrastructure to be able to expand the capacity of the state to to generate the oil. We do not have that. Allow me to say this one.
Very quickly, yeah.
There was an economic analysis that was made, I think last year or 2 years ago, where they say for Nigeria to bring the Nigerian people out of extreme hunger and poverty and put them on a pedestal where they can compete as a service country or manufacturing or production country, that Nigeria necessarily needed $30 billion investment every year up to 7 years. So all this borrowing we're talking about and the revenue, do you know that they are not more than 2, 3, or 4 billion? Worst case scenario. So we are still underfunded. We still have very limited money to be able to cause the change that the Nigerian people will see overnight. That is the reason.
Okay, Barrister, you seem to justify two things. One, sharing, revenue sharing among the federating units. Yes, money accrued and then shared among the federation and the federal government and the states, which is not visible for the ordinary people to see. That is one. You talked about increase in oil production, which ordinarily should raise the revenue generation of the government and be able to deliver on the key promise. The key promise here is education. And as we speak, in the education aspect, you discover that nothing has changed. In fact, the indices are growing in terms of deficit. For instance, at the point President Bwala Tinubu took over, Nigeria has 10.5 million out-of-school children. Today we're talking about 20 million out-of-school children. Investment in education, for instance, was grossly inadequate. Yet it was never getting close to 27%, of the revenue that is benchmarked by UNESCO. Again, our education system cannot compete, at the global stage. what Nigerians perhaps expect was that money will be freed to provide infrastructure in schools, to recruit teachers who have the capacity to deliver knowledge, to impart knowledge, to create an enabling environment for education to thrive. But that wasn't the case here. How would you justify this?
I agree with you that education is the baseline for any economic recovery and economic growth of any country. The country cannot go beyond the literacy level of its citizen. I also will tell you that Nigerians, in a comparative analysis, Nigerians are far ahead. More than 70% of the African states and Nigerians all over the world, where they acquire education, they compete with the best of the best. That suggests that there is something in the bloodstream of a Nigerian to be able to compete when given the right education. Now, come to Nigeria. What amounted or accounted to the volume of out-of-school children is not a one-off situation. So I bring you to the northern part of Nigeria where I come from. Because of the insecurity that has pervaded the north for over 12 to 15 years now, where the bandits, the Boko Haram, and all of this insecurity in our areas have not only chased people out of their homeland where they have their education, they've been pushed to IDP, displaced places. And displaced places, what they have are makeshift arrangement. In most of the IDP, there are no schools or learning opportunity. So what is accounting to the volume of out-of-school children is not magic, it is insecurity. But if you look at what the government is doing over the last 1 year, the government is attaining some degree of success in the area of insecurity. If you go to the northern Nigeria, you look at the northeast Borno, Yobe, and the rest, you can see that most of the people have been taken back to their lands. There are no identified towns or local government that are taken over by the Boko Haram. So the process of rebuilding takes time. When the American people invaded Iraq and Afghanistan, the process that led to the building of that country took 15 or 20 years. Rebuilding is always a difficult thing because just like you said, it involves infrastructure, it involves manpower because you then have to bring people who are trained. And then we talk about the facilities for learning. Then even these our children who left school, because if you look at part of the activities of Boko Haram in the northern Nigeria is attacking education. So it is one thing for you to be able to take the people back to their homeland. It's another thing for you to be able to work in their psychic where they will believe that they can go to schools and be safe. That's why I think the UN introduced what they call School Without Borders, where education can transcend just the four walls of a classroom and you devise means by which you can push that envelope further. We're looking at developing infrastructure in Nigeria where learning can be delivered to people without having to come to a class. Like during the COVID, all over the world, learning were delivered to people in their respective homes via Zoom, via different technology. We have to explore that. We don't have any excuse. We have to explore that, in Nigeria. And this government is doing it. But I want to tell you, sir, you look at the recent rejigging of the cabinet by the president. The minister of education was removed. I don't want to say accuse him or anything, but the mere fact that the president had to do a change suggests to you, I'm sure it must suggest to you that the president is concerned about education. Probably he was not pleased by the pace of the growth in that area. So this administration is committed to expanding our capacity to train our people and make sure that education is delivered to the Nigerian people.
Thinking was also cosmetics because it didn't deal with the critical areas of need. Power, for instance, has been an abysmally low. Economy is in shambles, is dwindling, and a number of areas that ought to have been taken care of. Anyway, one of the intended reasons for the removal of subsidy again is revamping the healthcare sector. Basically, Mr. President talked about the need to address the healthcare sector, by intervening, to provide the basic requirements, things that are needed to move it forward. But unfortunately, with the rising cost of living and of course, the impact of the exchange rate and what have you, cost of drugs and other consumables has gone astronomically high. And even with the, what do you call it now, the executive order that was signed by the president, things remain unchanged. Almost 2-3 months after. So how would you convince Nigerians here that the initial intention of subsidy removal to address the healthcare gaps has been achieved?
Well, in the area of healthcare, I'm sure that the government is making the effort. I know that there was a plan to also create a subsidy kind of in the healthcare where people can access certain drugs at a subsidized rate. Then there are certain prescription drugs that are very heavy. The government can find a way of coming. The government is looking to look at drugs such as diabetes drugs, drugs for cancer, related matters, and hypertension. Some of these illnesses that will have a toll, life-threatening illnesses that will have a toll on the Nigerian people. Government is looking to subsidize in terms of, getting for drugs. Of course, the National Health Insurance Scheme that is being accessed by the Nigerian people. We can say it is small, we intend to expand it. But there is something we must address as a people, and we have the capacity as a nation, which is that we must develop our capacity to produce drugs. We don't have any excuse. During the COVID, one of the concepts that came, and I think some good Nigerians who are pharmacists or people who are in those industries came up with the idea of producing our own vaccines, producing prescription drugs. We have the capacity to do that. So government would rather invest. Yeah. Can I finish that? Government would rather invest in bringing out the potentials of Nigerians. Why do you think the Indians are best in medical science all over the world? Because of the number of diseases that the Indian people face over a period. You must always dig deep and bring a solution to the problems that has consistently buffeted our land. So government is investing not just in providing the drugs, but developing the technology that is required for us to, have a breakthrough in the pharmaceutical industry.
Now, how do you look inward? Some would say, considering the fact that the policy, the impact of the policy is also being felt. A number of pharmaceuticals have left the country, a number of businesses are leaving the country in droves. Even the local businesses have folded up, a number of them, substantial number of them. If you go through the figures from the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, you will weep for this country. And yet, we have a policy, a reform that we hope, will take this country to the promised land. Are we really making headways, looking at the statistics, very disturbing statistics?
So let me tell you, I know that a lot of optics and conversation people have hammered on this idea that foreign companies are leaving Nigeria. There are two reasons. Some of these foreign countries have been enjoying what we call the rent seeking. They have enjoyed more than the required tax holidays and some benefits, and they have failed to deliver on the needed reciprocal impact on the society. For example, if you're a foreign business in America, there are certain things you must do that will impact on the American people. But we have found that foreign companies in Nigeria over the years have taken advantage of not just the system, but even the people, where, for example, there are disproportionate application of payment. I know of a private hospital in Abuja here, where the foreign doctors are paid, as at that time, that was about 7 years ago, or 6 years ago, the foreign doctors were paying $10,000 per month, and the Nigerian doctors were paid $250,000. How do you fix that? It is the government of Nigeria. For instance. It is because before now, policies were not put in place to make them pay their respects in those host countries where they are operating. And we're looking to change that. But another thing that is also very crucial for small-scale businesses, one of the reasons why a small business can close is this. Even if you have goods and services, if the purchasing power of the people is not there to patronize you, then that means you will not have a turnover. Over a period of time, you will see that you'll be out of business. So the people going out of business is because the purchasing power of the people has gone down because of the reform process. But the policy of the government is trying to create an environment where people can begin to develop and also have purchasing power. And then you will see our businesses bouncing back. I want to guarantee Nigerians, in the next 1-2 years, when these policies would have taken their root, because they must have a foundation. You can't build on a house without foundation. And this foundation has never been convenient. I've never seen where they are doing foundation of a building and people are celebrating, because most of what you do at foundational level are even buried in the sand.
Right. Okay.
But certainly we are going to come to the level where the Nigerian people will see the fruit of this reform.
Yeah. Very quickly before we open the lines, because we need to expand the conversation and engage Nigerians. One of the intended benefits also was to create jobs. But looking at the statistics, unemployment has risen from 4.2% it was in the fourth quarter of 2023 to 5.3%. That is, indicating a rise in spite of the intention of providing jobs to Nigerians. Again, to sum it up, the other economic policies like the exchange rate we are talking about, the harmonization, was also to free some money to be able to inject into the economy. Again, Mr. President at that point was talking about also doing a reform that will not increase, inflation, or rather impact inflation negatively. But what we're seeing today is a different ball game altogether. 22%, at the point of the inception of this administration. Today we're talking about 33.4 thereabout percent. So what are we really getting in terms of the benefit of these reforms?
So let me give you one example of inflation. Let's look at food inflation. Now, food inflation is caused when, for example, there are low production. We don't have much, food to circulate in the market. We have scarcity. Where you have scarcity, or in the case where you have abundance, but the people do not have purchasing power because of the increase of prices of food items. Take, for example, if you look at Borno and Yobe, few months ago there was a flood, and around the time of harvest, and this flood affected the entire area and destroyed the food crops and some of these agricultural farm produce for the purposes of trade and business. Now, that singular act of the natural disaster in Borno, Yobe, and the environs will definitely have impact in the market. Because take, for example, beans and fish and some of these other food crops that are produced from there. With that natural disaster, it creates scarcity in the market. Now, the minute there is a scarcity of this product in the Nigerian market, those ones that are already on ground, the prices of item will go up. And once that happens, it will cause food inflation. This thing is a case of cause and event, cause and effect.
Right.
So it is not like a magic wand. It is not, there are certain things that happen. Take, for example, natural disaster. Are they part of government policy?
So Nigerians should brace up for more challenges, because if we're talking about this at the point of harvest, then what will happen in a couple of months to come? Okay, it's about time we open the line so that Nigerians can also call and share their thoughts. The number will soon be on your screen. Call us, share your thought with us, go straight to the point, tell us who you are, where you're calling from, and of course, stay away from your TV set or put it up completely so that we can communicate. Okay, before the calls come in, Barrister, you talked about purchasing power consistently, and one of the intention of the reforms. Okay, we have a call on the line. Hello, good evening. Hello, good evening.
Hello?
Yes, good evening.
Good evening, Shafiu Suleiman.
Yes, good evening. Who do we have on the line?
We are speaking to Shafiu.
Shamaki, go ahead very quickly, please.
Yeah, the money of Tinubu policy is making the hardship, scarcity of food in the market, and Nigerians dying with hunger. Simple. Good answer.
Okay, that's your summary of the. Okay, thank you very much for your input. Okay, okay. Before we get another caller, we've heard what this Nigerian said. His own understanding of the reform is about cost of living crisis, about hunger, about and so on and so forth. But I was asking earlier, you talk about purchasing power, which is also tied to this. Mr. President's intention, during the speech, or rather when he was making that speech, was that he hopes that purchasing power of Nigerians, will rise, so that Nigerians will be able to benefit from the reforms. But what we are seeing today is declining purchasing power, in spite of these reforms. Is this, buttressing the fact that?
So,
okay,
there is an economic analysis that says, because economics is a theory, right? Yeah. There is an economic theory that says when a greater population of the people are below a certain poverty level, the most effective way of bringing the people out of poverty is to fund the poverty. In other words, the government will have to keep giving monies to the people, like intervention, where you keep giving, like in America, they can call it food stamps, they can call it, like during the COVID in America, where people were getting COVID relief funds. Because of COVID, some people in businesses were not able to operate, and some were send their people out of business, sack their workers because they are not able to survive. So government continue to give them money. The whole idea of giving people money is so they can sustain, if not improve, their purchasing power. Because purchasing power increase is what stimulates the economy. So this economic theory says that if the level of poverty of the people is below a certain level, that the most effective way of taking them out is to fund poverty. And this is what the program of government you have seen over the last 1.5 years, where you see certain monies given to those who do not have jobs, so that they will be able to go to the market, buy food crops, pay the tuition fees for their children. And the more you keep doing that, the money circulates, because the person who sells a product for you gets the money, goes to the market, buys the person who sells, and that is how you have a cyclical effect of economic activities that will keep the economy going.
And when you keep injecting money, you also continue to aid inflation. Again, looking at handouts, Nigerians said they're not interested in the handouts. Even the handouts are too little, too slow, in terms of reaching out. Government has been talking about palliatives. Palliatives are not reaching the ordinary people. Don't you think, it is time government listen to other arguments? The IMF is saying that for you to have the buy-in of the people, you have to, get them to see the benefits of some of these reforms. Clearly spelled out benefits for the reforms, that one. And then get them to also buy into it, own up the project. But Nigerians, as it is, are at par with the thinking of the government. How do you think this can be addressed?
Isn't the benefit of the reform demonstrated in the intervention we're talking about? Because when you're undertaking a reform, everybody knows it's going to be very, very uncomfortable and inconveniencing for everyone. There is nobody who is in doubt as to that. So when the people are placed in that difficult situation, the duty of government is to provide intervention. That intervention is what even the IMF admits as the benefit of the reform, meaning that while you are carrying out the reform, you are giving, and you are now telling me that some people say they don't want the handout. So the benefit which IMF say give to the people say they don't want.
Now, they need to create. They want an enabling environment. Put them into work.
If you permit me, permit me to land. Right. I think we have a valid conversation around the effectiveness of the administration of the relief, which is why President Bwala Tinubu has always, if you remember, been begging the governors to please administer the monies coming to their state via the increased revenue allocation to effect the change that is needed. Nigeria is a federating state, which means there is a federal government and there are federating units. These federating units collect the money to administer in their state. The federal government is small. The people at the federal government is small. A greater number of the Nigerian people are in the states. So if a governor before now gets, say, 10 naira, and he said he's managing to pay worker salary, now he's getting 70 naira, for God's sake. What stops him from developing building the schools and rehabilitating the schools that are bad? What stops him from providing good healthcare service in their state, providing some of these machines like dialysis machine, some of these critical things that will deal with the problem our people are facing? But you see that a lot of people have complained that once governors get their pay, forex increases. So do you now take that and blame the president? Because remember, again, like I said, it is a federal government. If the president tries to begin to dictate for states and try to coerce them, it will take us back to the same time of Obasanjo, where people say you are interfering in the independence of the state, or you are trying to run the government as if it is a dictatorial government. Yeah. What we are lacking, I must be honest with you and Nigerians, is that Nigerians have failed to also focus on governors and their efficiency or otherwise. We have always pointed our fingers at the president. Until this issue is dealt with, 30 years, 100 years, we may not be able to see those changes that we need in the state, because governors now have become more of a businessman than a government at the state level.
Okay, Barrister, I understand we have to go, but then we have a lot more to talk about. Perhaps we need another session to address some of these issues. Thank you very much, Barrister Daniel Bwala. Special Advisor to President Bwala Tinubu on policy communication, for talking to us on Sunday Politics. We really appreciate your inputs.
Thank you for having me. And I hope that when next I'll be in the studio with you.
Great. Thank you very much once again. And viewers, that's a wrap on this week's edition of Sunday Politics. Do join us. We'll be back tomorrow with another interesting topics and personalities. Until then, I'm Shafiu Suleiman. Many thanks for being there.